Hello, everybody. Welcome to the video. Today, we're going to talk about something that I think is really kind of interesting, belly fat. I mean, how many people lose weight and still end up with some type of fat around the midsection? And it can be really aggravating. So let's take a look at some of the things we can do, because there are answers for this to trim down that midsection and get yourself really looking great and feeling even better. So let's look back. Our ancestors didn't have this problem, and younger people have this problem less than middle-aged and older people. So think about what that might mean. Possibly it's hormones. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And when we get down later in this video, I'm going to give you some hacks at the very end so you get some simpler ways. But I want to cover a bunch of tips. You can do as many of these tips as you want. The more, the better, obviously. Some of them will fit your lifestyle, some of them won't, right? So we're going to start off. I'm going to hit the big one first, the hard one for some people. It's not hard for me, but I don't drink, right? But alcohol. Alcohol really does have a negative effect on belly fat, fat in general. The number of calories in alcohol, it's pretty high. It's almost the same as eating fat, which, obviously burns really good if you have your body set up right, but alcohol doesn't burn too well, and it gets stored as belly fat, especially because it ends up affecting your liver. So to really get a good trim body, you need a healthy liver. Liver breaks down a lot of fat. It breaks down a lot of food for you, and it gives you energy. And when we make more energy, we'll have more vitality. We can do our exercise more intensely. Everything just works a little better. Let's get into carbs, though. Carbs are, as you know, refined sugars are terrible. Carbohydrates can be a problem if out of whack with your diet. So one of the tricks with carbohydrates is to make sure when you're having a meal, you eat your salad first. It turns out, even though there's a fair amount of carbohydrates in salad, the fiber is so great that it diminishes the amount of insulin that spikes from those carbohydrates, because fiber will slow down the speed at which a carbohydrate invades your blood. That glycemic index that you hear about if you ever did the zone diet or keto diets, you'll understand how that works. But it's simple. You basically eat a salad first with oil and vinegar. Between the vinegar and the salad fiber, you're going to actually not spike the insulin. So one of the tricks here is don't let the insulin come up too high, and don't let it happen too many times. And we'll get to that a little bit in some other tips. High protein is another trick, right? So if you're focused on eating a fair amount of protein, you're going to have a lot less carbohydrates going in your body. And in nature, protein and fat come together. You think of an animal. Our ancestors didn't have a lot of fruits and vegetables available to them because those are seasonal. Animals tend not to be as seasonal, right? So you can eat those all year round. Fruits are not available that often in a year's time in most environments. So if we're eating fruit all the time, you're getting a much higher glycemic index. So we want to limit those and focus on a fair amount of protein. I tell people about the size of the palm of their hand 3 times a day. That's the best way to do it. And don't worry about a lean protein or not. I think that's overkill. Just eat the protein, have some fat. Fat and protein are not going to be a problem, believe it or not, for belly fat. It's really going to be those carbs. Another trick, eat less frequently. Now, you've heard about maybe fasting or intermittent fasting. They both have a lot of value. Intermittent fasting, I think, is a lot easier than doing a fast for 24 hours or 48 hours. And that can throw off people's metabolism. Obviously, if you have blood sugar issues, you should never do that kind of thing. But having a window of eating, say you take 6 hours and no snacking, and you have 2 meals in there. So you have 2 insulin spikes, or 2 times your insulin has to go up. That will limit how you store fat. So you're not spiking insulin. So I have people that 11 a.m. they'll have their first meal. So it's kind of a late breakfast. Then their last meal will be at 5 p.m. That's a great way of giving 2 insulin spikes, limiting how much food you're probably going to ingest, and overall losing not just fat, but also that belly fat that's associated with insulin. Outside of protein, what should we be eating? Well, one of the ways to stop the estrogen surges and the phytoestrogen, like the fake estrogens that go in your body, is to make sure you're eating cruciferous vegetables. The cruciferous vegetables have a compound called DIM, and DIM will help regulate estrogen. When you regulate the amount of estrogen being put through your body, you're going to have a little bit more testosterone ratio, a higher testosterone to estrogen ratio. That is why men lose weight easier than women. How often has it been a husband and wife decide they're going to go on a diet, the man loses 50 pounds, and the woman loses 7? I hear it all the time. People come in and say, oh, look how good Dan's doing. Look at Dan, look at me. I'm not good, right? And it's because she's carrying more estrogen. That's why it's a little tougher, a little less muscle mass. Muscle's a furnace, so to burn calories. So we want to make sure that we're dealing with our estrogen properly, and eating cruciferous vegetables will keep that down, keeps the estrogen down is what you're really looking for. We mentioned earlier a salad. Well, a salad, the one I tell you to eat is going to have oil and vinegar, and then you can spice it however you want. But the vinegar helps break down food. When you break down food better, you have all those nutrients available for more energy. Also, if you take say a tablespoon twice a day before those 2 meals, it's going to give you a mild sense of being full. And when you're mildly full, you can eat less food, right? So sometimes it's volume that's causing the belly fat, but it's also all these other factors. Now, another tip, walking after meals. Walking after meals has now been demonstrated to start to burn the calories that are left over from the amount of food that you ate. It'll help balance the insulin again. Once again, we're talking about those insulin spikes, keeping those level. And it'll burn some of the carbohydrates that will end up being stored as fat if you didn't burn them. Think if you eat, your body puts it all over the place to rebuild you. What's left over gets stored as fat. So if you can burn that before it ends up getting stored as fat, you don't have to pull it out of fat. You can burn it right away before it ends up being stored. It's a lot easier. Now let's look at some nighttime stuff. One of the things that a lot of people do is look at their devices before they go to bed. And you may have heard about the blue light coming out of them, or just the fact that there's light coming out of them. It stimulates something in your brain called the pineal gland. That's a day-night cycle gland that your eyes will use to make sure that it's day and wake you up in bright lights. That's why we sleep in the dark. So if you can not look at those devices towards the end of the day, or you use blue blocking glasses when you do so, that helps. But I suggest reading real books. Take actual books, put some light, just enough light behind you so you can read them. And that has a sedating effect. And you really want to wind yourself down before you go to bed. You don't want to be all energized and stimulated with, all kinds of horrible topics that you might have been watching on the news or scanning through on your phone. And then expect all that body chemistry to just start calming down and feeling better. It's just not a great way of ending it, as you imagine. So speaking of that, let's get into stress management, okay? So stress causes cortisol. When cortisol goes up, it actually has a spiking of your insulin because your body's getting ready to take on a stress. So it's going to start to metabolize things, and it uses insulin. Insulin comes up to do that. We never want to trigger insulin, like we said earlier, because that's going to go and do more damage to your body's ability to store fat in the stomach again. So we want to make sure that no matter what we do, we are managing the amount of stress that we have. And it's the same, like I said earlier, you want to make sure you're calming down. You're spending some time in prayer and in meditation, writing down your thoughts, getting some of the stress out of your body, especially before you go to bed so you get a nice deep sleep. Now, speaking of sleep, we want to go to bed early. I've said before in other videos, 9 to 5, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. The closer you get that, better. Some people that I know that's impossible.